AP Automation, How to Move Forward. This is the second webinar in a series. The first one, which was AP Automation, Where to Start, it focused on a couple of things. What are some of the key goals for accounts payable, both from the perspective of senior management as well as from the perspective of accounts payable departments. In that webinar, we talked about 20 different types of AP automation, things that maybe you're already doing or things that you may want to consider doing. We talked about the adoption rate by other companies from various surveys that have been done to give you a sense of who is and how many companies are doing various kinds of AP automation. We talked about some of the common barriers as well as some of the catalysts and drivers that can help you get automation going. In this webinar, we're going to focus on how to move forward. This is an overview of what we're going to cover in terms of the intro, just a little information about me. You can refer to this later, send me an email if you have questions. But the very first thing that you need to focus on in order to move forward is you need to understand what's the approval process within your company to get automation projects or any other kinds of projects approved. And what we've done over the years is we've identified who are the people, who are the function, what are the functions that are involved in the decision process. And we've identified the various people who may or may not be involved in the process. And the second thing we've done is we've identified 5 different roles. One of the really important things is that one person in that top group may have one or more roles in the decision process. But probably the most critical role is the last one, which is oftentimes overlooked, which is what I'll call the barrier. These are people who prevent moving forward. You need to identify who those people are. They may be some of the other roles as well, but you need to make sure that you develop an appropriate rapport and make sure that you are able to help overcome those barriers. These may be people who are reluctant to change. So it's very key to identify the roles of people and, most importantly, to make sure that you identify and deal with the barriers. Once you've understood your company's decision-making process as well as understand the roles of the various people, you then need to take a look at those various options, those 20 options, and decide what's best and appropriate for you. And I believe that there are 6 different areas that you should focus on, and we're going to talk about each of those. In terms of your current state of automation, it's very important to understand how processes really work. Not the theory of how accounts payable works, but what are the steps and how they actually are performed. Who does what, how long it takes, what kind of effort, what kinds of issues are associated with every step associated with whether it's paying bills, whether it's processing expense reports, whether it's filing, whether it's paying, issuing checks, paying by ACH, using purchasing cards, any of the functions that are done within accounts payable. You don't get this information by sitting around the table and talking about it. You get this information by observing what's really going on. You also need to understand the capabilities and limitations of your staff, because those are the people who are going to be impacted by automation, as well as the people who are going to help make the automation a success or hold it back from happening. So you want to know who can do what, who needs to learn what, and who can contribute in which ways, both to the day-to-day work currently after the automation is in place, as well as what they can do to contribute to making your project a success. You want to make sure you understand the automation that you currently have in place, and this may include spreadsheets, undocumented activities that are done in order to do the workarounds that are often involved in successful accounts payable processing. You want to make sure you understand some of the key metrics. What are your current costs? What is the current effort? What kinds of exceptions? What kind of error rates? What we found oftentimes, it's not necessarily the quality of what gets processed within accounts payable, it's the quality of what comes into accounts payable. So you want to make sure that you're doing some tracking to see how accurate the information, how accurate transactions are when they come into accounts payable, and once they get into accounts payable, how many of them have problems, how many of them require exception processing, because those kinds of transactions are the things that increase your cost, increase processing effort, and increase the amount of time it takes, or the cycle time, to process transactions successfully into completion. You want to collect some data so that you have some baseline, so that you know where you currently are, because as you implement automation, you want to set some goals and you want to identify how some of those things may change, whether it's your costs are going to go down, whether effort is going to go down, whether accuracy, reliability, error rates are going to change, whether cycle time is going to shrink. You also want to identify who are the people internally and externally within your company, business partners, maybe it's some of your suppliers that are going to be impacted by the automation. You want to make sure you understand who is going to be impacted by the automation changes that you're going to be making, because you want to make sure that you get some of their inputs in terms of understanding the whole process from the original need to the time the transaction is successfully processed and the vendor is paid or the employee is reimbursed or the transaction is completed. There are a bunch of pressures that you are faced with from stakeholders. From above, typically, you have two pressures. Can you do it for less? Can you do it with fewer people? In all the years I've been working with accounts payable departments, I've never been in a department that was overstaffed. Your internal customers, the departments that send your transactions to be processed, the main thing they're going to be concerned about if accounts payable does expense processing is, where's my expense reimbursement? The second most frequent question is, why are the vendors calling me? Well, one of the reasons vendors oftentimes call internal customers is the invoice is sitting on the internal customer's desk. It's never gotten sent down to accounts payable. Accounts payable can't process transactions that it hasn't received. And then vendors, of course, want to know, when am I getting paid? Or how do I get paid faster? In addition to that, accounts payable is faced with a number of challenges. As I said earlier, no AP departments that I've ever been in, I've been in on the order of 500 over the years, has ever had excessive number of people. But they're always under pressure to do it with fewer people, do more, improve productivity, but at the same time, you've got to do it quickly and you have to do it accurately. Technology keeps changing. 7 years ago, very few people had smartphones. Today, almost everyone has, and smartphones and tablets are technologies that are beginning to change how people approve, how people review, and how people submit certain kinds of transactions. So you've got to keep up to date on technology in terms of what's available, what is leading edge, what's appropriate for your organization. Regulatory compliance is another critical issue. Some people call this revenue enhancement. The states, the federal government, local governments, and governments in other countries. You may have suppliers in other parts of the world. You've got to keep up to date on the regulations in terms of what you have to do and what kinds of reporting you might have to be doing, and have good process and automation in place so that you can comply. Of course, the last thing is you have to get today's work done today and tomorrow's work done tomorrow. You've got to get the day-to-day work done, and at the same time, you're going to be focusing on doing some projects so that you can plan and put things in place for the future. So these are the challenges that every AP department I've been in seems to have. What I think is next key is what's the appropriate way to get an automation solution in place. And I think one key thing is that you don't want to pick a solution that's going to require a lot of programming. If this was 30 or 40 years ago, programming was the norm. But today, you really want solutions that are largely out of the box. You may need to be doing some amount of customization, but you should be careful about how much customization you do, because as you go to a next release of some software or an upgrade, you probably have to worry about retesting and possibly reconfiguring some of that customization. One of the things that I think is very key in today's climate is finding solutions that can largely rely on allowing to use configuration tools and business rules to control how the processes work. And ideally, those configuration tools can be used by the end user, people within accounts payable, rather than having to wait and rely on information technology resources to be freed up to work on accounts payable projects. I think one of the key things when you seek a solution is think of the party that you're going to be working with as a partner. You want to make sure they have certain expertise. In particular, they should have some experience working with your enterprise resource planning or financial accounting system. Last time I looked, there were about 260 different systems in use in the U.S. and approximately the same number of different systems above and beyond that used in other parts of the world. So there's a base of on the order of maybe 500 different products that are out there that people are using. So you want a solution provider that has some expertise in the systems that you currently have in place. You want to make sure they know something about your industry. Every industry seems to have certain kinds of transactions that for everyone else never happen. They might be obscure, they might be unusual, they might be inappropriate. But various industries do have practices. You want to make sure that the solution that you pick and the solution provider that you pick knows something about your industry and has experience working with other customers within your industry. And that really relates to the next point, which is you want to select a partner that has clients with similar kinds of transactions that you do. This really relates in many cases to the industry practices and requirements. And you also want to pick a provider that's worked with companies that are your size or even bigger. And you also want to make sure that the partner that you pick has an intelligent implementation approach. It has appropriate time frames, appropriate resources that can be identified in terms of what is going to have to be done and how long it's going to take for this implementation of this new set of processes and automation to work successfully. I think it's very key to look both at the one-time impact of any automation solution as well as the ongoing impact. So for example, up front, if you're considering one or several different types of automation projects, what's it going to cost up front? How much effort is involved? How long is it going to take? Can it be phased? Can it be done in a couple of small bites rather than one gigantic leap of faith? What kind of resources are going to be needed? Am I going to need people within accounts payable? Am I going to need some of the people outside of accounts payable on my project team to get this job done? Am I going to need internal IT resources, or can my partner bring the resources and the skills that we may not have in our own organization? Another thing is you want to look at the risks, and there really are two types of risks. The risks that are associated with the particular project you're taking on, as well as the risks that you may be faced with if you don't do this, particularly if you have issues that fall into the regulatory or policy compliance areas. You want to make sure that you understand what are the risks of each particular project. And other is a category, well, there's always something other. It's something that's unique to the way you do business. It's something unique to the way your organization or your culture of your company or department has to address. And then you also want to look up front. You want to look at what's the ongoing impact going to be on a going forward basis. What kinds of costs am I going to incur? Earlier we talked about baseline metrics. You want to see, are certain costs going to go up and are other costs going to go down? Hopefully the ones that go down are going to have a greater impact, positive impact, than any ongoing costs that might be going up. You want to understand how many people and how many processes within AP are going to be impacted by the change, because it may mean that we need fewer people. It may mean that we need different skills. We also want to make sure that we understand how this is going to impact other people and other processes within your company that are external to your AP department. Because if a broad range of people are going to be impacted, having a new process, new procedures associated with the automation, you want to make sure that you have sufficient time for training those people and a sufficient process for making sure that that is phased in an appropriate way. You also may be impacting people external to your own company. It may be some of your suppliers are going to be impacted, change the way they do things. It may be that there are some regulatory issues that may impact it as well. Of course, you want to take a hard look at AP productivity, because one of the key goals of any sort of automation is to improve and enhance productivity. You want to see how it affects cycle time, and there are several different cycle times that you may want to look at. You might want to look and see how is this automation going to impact the amount of time that it takes from the time a transaction, let's say it's an invoice, arrives at your company to the time that it takes to arrive to accounts payable. Or you may want to look at the cycle time from the time it arrives at accounts payable to the time it's actually posted in your system, or maybe it's the cycle time from the time you issue the payment to the time that the supplier or employee actually sees the money in their bank account. Cash management and cash flow is another area that oftentimes senior management wants to know. How is this automation going to give us better visibility into what our cash requirements are, or allow us to control cash flow more tightly? Automation usually adds significantly stronger and better controls. So you want to understand what controls are going to be changed, what's going to be improved, and there usually is very much an improvement when you put in automation over manual processes. And of course, the proverbial other, because there are always some other things that are going to happen, and you want to make sure to the degree you can up front of understanding what the ongoing impact is going to be. The next thing, which is really critical, because it's one thing to understand who is going to make the decision, who are the parties involved, but you also want to make sure that you have a strong business case. A business case should be put in place because it's going to help you to convince the blockers why you should be doing this. It's going to help you focus on what needs to be done, on the priorities, because a good business case and a good automation solution may have several steps to it. There may be phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, each adding more value and each having some more both one-time and ongoing impact. And so you want to identify what should be done first, what should be done second, what should be done third. When I talk about phases, those phases may be short. Some of them may be 20 or 30 days. Some of them may be 2 or 3 months. But in general, most solutions that I think can be effective can be done in various phases so that you can show results relatively easily and relatively quickly. Another thing about a business case, it helps you justify what you're going to be doing, and also includes, as we'll see on the next slide, how you're going to accomplish what has to be done. But most importantly is a business case helps you overcome one of the key barriers to automation, which is getting the approval to proceed. What's fascinating is I've looked at surveys over many, many years now, and anyone who asks how long does it take to get a project approved, regardless of the size of the company, regardless of the industry, it seems to take close to a year, 10 months, 11 months. I saw one survey where I drilled down and looked at the details. Somebody said it took them 5 years to get approval. It took them 1 month to implement the project. That isn't the kind of thing you want to do. But let's now talk about what should be in the business case. Your business case should not be a phone book-sized document. It shouldn't be a PhD thesis. It should be fairly short. It should be very much to the point. And one of the things that's very important is, in putting together the business case, your solution provider partner, Prodagio, or whomever you pick, can help fill in a lot of the details. The executive summary should be written last, probably should be no more than 1 or 2 pages long. Provide some of the key highlights from all of the other sections. The background in terms of describing your current situation and some of the key problems, again, does not have to be very long. It can be a couple of pages. The objective, what it is you're trying to accomplish. 1 page might be sufficient. Some of the alternatives you looked at, again, 1 or 2 pages, probably sufficient to describe what are the different kinds of automation options that you've considered, and then you want to describe the proposed solution. In the business case, I don't think you have to go through a great deal of detail as to exactly how the solution is going to work. You can very much draw on other documents that your solution provider, your partner, can typically provide to you. And the proposed solution might include some demos and some examples of this. But I think what's key is to document what are some of the benefits and what are the costs. And this is an area where solution providers like Prodagio can help tremendously because they've been through this before. They understand what the benefits are, they understand what the costs are, and they can help you put together those sections, which I believe are very key portions of your business case. Assumptions and constraints, dependencies and interdependencies, these are areas that you do want to address. Just to make sure that somebody reading and reviewing this can say, oh, now I understand why you have to do this first. Now I understand we better do this before you go on to this next step. Another area where your solution provider can help tremendously is what's the return on investment, the ROI? What's the payback period? How long is it going to be before the savings are going to exceed the initial costs? Doesn't have to be very long, maybe a page or 2. And then the risks. Just spell them out so that they're in black and white in terms of, so people understand what are the risks of doing this and what are the risks of not doing anything. Lastly, I believe it's very important that a business case includes an implementation plan. Identifies the resources internally as well as those to be provided by external partners. How long is it going to take? What are the key milestones? What are the deliverables? What are the phases? Basically, something that can be used to then manage the project. Those, I believe, are some of the key things in how you can move forward with AP automation. I just want to give you a couple of final thoughts. I want to make sure that you understand the available options and which of those options are appropriate and feasible and reasonable for your company as well as your accounts payable department. You want to make sure you understand the skills, capabilities, limitations of the systems that you already have in place, as well as capabilities and limitations of the people within your organization. You need to be flexible. You are going to have to make some changes. The best solutions often require change, and change is something that is oftentimes difficult for people to deal with. So understand the importance of this and the importance that you too may very well have to be willing to make some changes. You want to set priorities in terms of the phasing, what's going to be done first, set goals that are reasonable and realistic. I believe not only do you need good metrics in terms of where you are in terms of your current costs, your current effort, your current cycle time and such, but also you want to have some project metrics to see whether the project is on track, whether the project is proceeding in a timely fashion and producing the results. The key to success of any project is the people who are involved in implementing the project as well as using the final results. So make sure that you use people intelligently. Pick technologies that are appropriate for you. They don't have to be bleeding edge. They can be bleeding edge, but they certainly are things, should be things that are appropriate for your organization. Don't be afraid of making change. Be creative. Think of different ways of addressing some of the problems, some of the key issues that you're faced with. And while we don't like to take a lot of risk, you should be taking appropriate risks, what I sometimes call controlled risks. That's pretty much it. I hope this gives you some information that can help you to move forward in terms of your AP automation. And I think one of the things you should do is contact Prodagio to find out more about what they do, how they work, visit their website, or speak with one of their solution experts to find out what automation they have and what it can do for your company. Thanks very much for your time.